I'm about 3/4 of the way finished with another video that will actually be good, but this Audacity drama is so stupid that I can't help but make a video about it. For those of you who don't know, Audacity is a free open source audio editing program that was first released in 2000, acquired by Muse Group in 2021. It's still open source, but under Muse Group its development is more focused, and they put Tantacruel in charge of design, so that's cool. Anyway, here's how all this spyware drama unfolded. In May of this year, Audacity began working on an optional user telemetry system so they could collect some user data. Specifically, they wanted info about how people use it, which could give the developers a good idea of what they need to improve on or streamline or scrap or whatever. Generally, the data they wanted to collect was pretty benign, but they did make a few errors in the way they communicated it. They didn't initially specify that this feature would be opt-in, and they also didn't really go into detail as to why they wanted the user telemetry. I mean, if you look at what information they were planning on taking, it's pretty obvious that they just wanted to know how people use Audacity so they could make it better, but it still is helpful to outline your intentions for those less technically literate or whatever. Concern really began to spark when the community at GitHub noticed that Audacity would be using Google Analytics and Yandex, which is kind of like a Russian Google, to host and process this data. This potentially meant that an otherwise anonymous IP address sending data to Audacity could end up being matched with an address in Google or Yandex's databases, maybe. It was probably a valid security concern, but I actually have doubts as to whether or not matching these IPs would be of any value to either Google or Yandex, even in like the most niche of circumstances, but that's another thing. Also, the potential use of Google Analytics might not have been compliant with GDPR in Europe. It seems kind of unclear, and as you can probably guess by my generic American accent, I'm not an expert on European privacy law, nor do I care to be. Anyway, when the feature popped up on Audacity's GitHub, some people had some perfectly valid questions and concerns, and some people went out of their way to sound as dumb as possible.
Telemetry won't tell you if users like the software or wish for a new feature. It only tells them that they've been subjected to economic surveillance in an economic manner.
I don't know what that means. We live our lives in a world where virtually we live in a society. Keep in mind, all of this discussion and drama occurred back in May, before this update was actually released. In fact, as of the making of this video in July, the 3.0.3 update still hasn't been released. Yeah, it isn't out yet. Right now, you would actually have to go out of your way to get a build of Audacity with these features. So in response to all of this backlash, Audacity acquiesced. They scrapped the telemetry collection altogether and opted to restrict the data that they would receive to error reports, which you can choose not to send, and automatic update checks, which I'm pretty sure you can opt out of. Getting an update generally means that the server hosting the updates knows and at least temporarily stores your IP address. Some people in the open source community really don't like that prospect and would rather, do the exact same thing on a web browser. They also changed their plans of using Google and Yandex's servers to a self-hosted server managed only by Audacity, and they re-emphasized that they will never sell or share your data unless some government goons force them to. More on that later. So after these update revisions, Audacity drafted some changes to their privacy policy so that it'll reflect the new features, obviously, and this is where everyone lost their minds. One bad article turned into 2, which turned into 10 bad headlines, and so followed a battalion of people armed with webcams looking for a payday. No, Audacity is not going to be selling user data. The clause in the privacy policy where it mentions giving data to a potential buyer is in reference to someone buying Audacity, the trademark, should Muse Group ever decide to sell it. The limited data that they'll be getting from error reports and the update checker will be stored and secured by Audacity. No, Audacity is probably not going to be funneling IP addresses to the Russian government, or any other government for that matter. The only circumstance I could think of where they'd do anything of that nature is where they'd legally be required to. Even then, IP addresses stored by Audacity will be irretrievable after 24 hours. If you're really that paranoid about your IP address being thrown around, you can just use a fork of Audacity, or an older version, or just use Siphon, or Tor, or a VPN. No, I am not sponsored by a VPN company.